3D Inspector Gadget Acrylic Nail Art Tutorial by Hotpinkzebrapolish. Hello everyone! In today's video I'm going to show you an Inspector Gadget themed nail design, and this could definitely be adapted to be a 4D design with moving parts and arms and everything if you wanted to. So if you wanted to go the extra mile, that would be awesome. I hope you like it as much as I do, and don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future videos as well. Begin with an overlay of light blue acrylic. Whenever I'm creating a character like this, I try to make a background color that isn't going to be super distracting or anything too bright or bold unless the character specifically calls for it. But for the most part, I think a really sort of unintrusive background color is ideal. So I've got that light blue, which just kind of disappears, I think, once the whole design is done. And then encase the nail with a layer of clear acrylic to make sure it is nice and strong, and this will protect that other thin layer of color acrylic, whatever color you choose, from getting damaged by your e-file or getting scratchy looking or anything like that. So just a couple beads. For whatever reason, I like to do my acrylic overlays in 2 beads, one from like the apex area down, and then one from the cuticle zone, then just kind of floating that over the entire nail. But after I've got that done, I'm going to file the nail into shape with my e-file, starting with a coarse bit to remove any bulk that there may be, and then switching over to a finer bit to go over the entire thing to smooth it out. That finer bit acts like a buffer block, so if you'd rather use a buffer block, that is obviously up to you. So now I'm going to be sculpting 2 hands that will be on the ends of his bionic arms. So he's got, these different arms that come out, and there's a whole bunch of different things that you could put with his arms. You can have so many different choices. I gave him 3 bionic arms in this design, but for the most part, or for this part of the design, right now I'm just going to be sculpting 2 of the end attachments. One of them is going to be a finger that's just holding, or a hand that's holding up one finger, which is the white circle currently. Haven't quite gotten to adjusting that yet. We'll start working on it right now. And then the other hand is going to be holding onto a magnifying glass, which is that kind of looks like a fry pan to me at the moment, but that frying pan looking shape on the other side is going to be the magnifying glass. So I'm going to continue adding details to that white hand that's just over there, and I know it's so hard to see the details of exactly what I'm doing since I'm working on a white nail form backing with white acrylic, but that is what we're working on. And it's so fun to work on a design like this where you can really personalize it and make it your own, and you can adjust, what his hands are doing or how many there are even, and have fun with it. And like I said, if you wanted to really go the extra mile, you can make it 4D and make his arms move or something. That would be awesome. So after I've got that finger holding up on the one hand, then I'm going to take white acrylic again on the other hand and add the little details of the hand that's actually holding the magnifying glass. Just like so. Then I'm going to add the thumb. I like to work back and forth like this on 2 pieces at the same time. I think it helps because you don't have to wait for acrylic to set up and then go back to it and then just, be sitting there doing nothing. You can keep working. So cut off a couple pieces of some very stiff wire, and I'm going to bend them into the shape that I want the arms to be. So it really helps to pre-plan your design to know how you want the arms bent so that you don't have to, because if you try to place them down and then bend them after they're in the nail, you run a huge risk of cracking the acrylic that sets them in place and having to fix it. But if you have a plan ahead of time of how you want the arms to be, once you glue them in place, you can just leave them and not try to mess with them at all. So now that you have them all bent, you're going to take some nail glue and simply glue them in place. So I like to, be near the top of the nail or the top of the canvas, which is kind of how I like to think of it, so that you have plenty of space to add his trench coat and his face and body down below. So just add those 3 little wire pieces that are going to be for those arms. And if they extend past the sidewalls of the nail, that's just fine. That actually adds a little bit more interest to the design, I think. And then the 2 arms, so the 2 that are higher up, I'm going to be gluing those little hand pieces I made before. So the finger hand, and then the magnifying glass hand. And just glue them in place. That glue acts as a temporary hold. I wouldn't rely on it to be your permanent fixture. So take some clear acrylic on the back and just kind of cap the ends of the wire and then those hands as well. So now we're going to be sculpting the rest of Sir Inspector Gadget on the rest of the nail. So I'm going to take a cover type of a color, or kind of like a beige, and I'm going to be using that to sculpt his face. And you want to sculpt his face right below where all those wires are glued down. And then I'm going to take some black acrylic and add the little bits of his hair that are sticking out the sides of his head underneath his hat. And then with gray, you can start filling in his hat. Now when you're working on that part of it, you have to work up and around those pieces of wire, which can be kind of awkward, and depending on the consistency of your acrylic, the acrylic may want to spread onto the wires and kind of go where it's not supposed to. And if that does happen, you just have to catch it and bring it back. So make sure that you're watching very closely and not, off in la la land, which I sometimes do. So you just have to keep kind of an eyeball on it and make sure that the acrylic is staying where it's supposed to. And then I'm going to take and sculpt a very skinny little triangle with white acrylic. When you're sculpting a really skinny piece like that, and same thing with the nose, I think it's actually more important to monitor your monomer than your polymer. So your monomer is your liquid, which I'm sure most of you know, but when you're dipping your brush into it, if you know you don't need much acrylic, don't dip the entire brush. Just dip the very ends. I mean, obviously it depends on how much acrylic you're going for, but if you're going for just like the tiniest little bit to sculpt his nose or something, dip just the very ends of the bristles in the monomer, and then dip it into the polymer, because the monomer has a certain saturation point, so it's not going to oversaturate and get to be way too big of a bead that's super dry. If you just do the same, the same little bit of dipping and then the same amount of time in your polymer, you're going to end up with a smaller bead. And I think it's easier to do it that way than to use this regular amount of monomer, but try to dip really quick or just a little bit of your brush. And I've seen different artists do it the other way, where they still dip their brush in the same process, and then they try to just grab less polymer. So for me, and obviously each person has their own process and their own style and their own preferences with these things, but I just think it's easier to try to control how much monomer is on your brush rather than how much polymer you grab with your brush. So after you have the rest of his outfit done, so I've got his little trench coat and his face done and everything else, I'm going to take some yellow acrylic and sculpt the third hand that is covering his mouth as if telling him he should not speak. So then with white paint, I'm going to be adding some details. I'm going to add the glass portion of the magnifying glass, and then I'm just going to highlight the fingers. That white acrylic isn't as bright of a white as as my white paint, so then I can take the white paint and you get these lovely shadows built in just when you do that. Add his little white eyeballs, and then with a lighter shade of gray, I'm going to be adding all of the highlights on his jacket and his hat. So this is another great little tip that I want to give you. If you sculpt things slightly darker than you want them to be in the end, so like his coat, slightly darker than the gray that you're hoping it'll be at in the end result, then you have this opportunity to add these really fun, very pop art blocky highlights, which is what I'm doing. And that technique is, I think, quicker than adding shadows, and I think it's a little bit easier. For whatever reason, to me, it's easier to put a highlight on something than it is to shadow it or to shade it. So it depends on what you like to do, but this is basically creating outlines. As you can see, there's little outlines around everything, and you don't have to do the outlines. You're painting a bigger space instead of a smaller space. I'm going to deepen or further those highlights with a little bit of white paint here and there, just to add a couple little brighter sections, and then adding some buttons on his trench coat with that little bit more of the white color. And then with yellow, same exact process, I'm going to be highlighting that third hand with yellow paint and a brighter shade than the yellow I sculpted with. Just like that. It's just so, I don't know, I think it's just so much faster this way as well. And I'm going to add his little ears, and as you can see, that color that I'm using to add his ears is brighter than the skin tone I use. So same thing, you guys guessed it. I'm going to be adding highlights on his face as well. So just go through, add those little touches of highlights, just like so. And because I'm who I am and I can't stop, I'm going to be adding outlines to this design as well. So I know that all I was saying up until this point is that doing those highlights the way I did makes it so you don't have to do outlines. It does. It makes it so that I think the outlines are optional. For me, personally, I love the look of really clean outlines. I think that it makes the design just pop more. And I also think that if you're outlining a design that's on a nail, it is so nice because nails are seen in these quick little flashes while you're paying for your coffee in the morning, which obviously we're all stuck at home right now, so nobody's going out and about and paying for coffee. But these quick flashes is when your nails are seen typically. And you want the design to have an instant impression is kind of what I like to think of it as. And if it's got these outlines and it's a super bold look, it's going to have that instant impression. And that just makes it so that your nails have that much more pizzazz to them. So that is my theory. But like I said before, the way the highlights are done, it does make outlines optional. So if it's not your thing, skip it. But then I'm going to take a dab of red gel polish and add the little hinges onto the bionic arms and then apply some gel sealer over the background as well as over that little bit of red gel polish that is on the hinges. Cure that and then some matte top coat over Inspector Gadget, and that is it. I really do love this design. I love how it almost has a flat look and yet it's 3D, so it's got kind of a dual purpose there. I hope you guys love it as much as I do, and don't forget to click subscribe, see all my future videos as well. Bye!